My name is Natalie Carson. I am 28 years old and a graphic designer by profession. The text message came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Natalie, we've decided you shouldn't attend the anniversary gala. Your presence would be uncomfortable for our guests. We hope you understand. Mother! I stared at my phone screen in my tiny studio apartment, the glow illuminating the dark circles under my eyes from another late night working. My hands trembled slightly as I read it again, though I shouldn't have been surprised. This was just the latest in a long line of rejections from Patricia and Leonard Carson, my parents who had perfected the art of public humiliation over the past 6 years. Ever since I'd chosen design school over law school, I'd become the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale they whispered about at country club brunches. My sister Veronica, the corporate attorney with the corner office and designer wardrobe, was their pride and joy. I was the mistake they tried to hide. I set my phone down and turned back to my laptop, where a design project glowed on the screen. The client, someone who only went by the initials JR, had sent me another assignment with their usual cryptic message. Your vision makes the invisible visible. Keep going. These messages had sustained me through 6 months of anonymous freelance work, each one feeling like someone actually saw my talent. I had no idea who JR was, but their projects challenged me in ways my regular clients never did. Tonight's assignment was a logo design for something called the Reckoning Initiative. Strange name, but the work felt important. I grew up in the Carson mansion on Whitmore Hill, where every room echoed with my parents' expectations. My childhood was measured in piano recitals I never wanted, etiquette classes that made me feel like a trained pet, and dinner parties where I was displayed like a trophy before being dismissed. My sister Veronica thrived in that world. She memorized legal briefs the way other kids memorize baseball stats. She debated politics with father's colleagues at age 12. She was everything they wanted, and I was everything they feared: creative, messy, passionate about things that couldn't be measured in billable hours or stock portfolios. The breaking point came during my college announcement dinner. I'd been accepted to both Harvard Law and the Rhode Island School of Design. Father had already ordered celebratory champagne for Harvard. When I said I'd chosen RISD, the silence was deafening. Mother's fork clattered against her plate. Father's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen. You're throwing away your future for crayons and finger paints, he'd said, his voice cold and sharp. That night, something fundamental shifted. I became the daughter they tolerated rather than loved. Over the next 6 years, they found countless ways to remind me of my failure. At family gatherings, they'd introduce Veronica with glowing pride and me with vague platitudes. This is our daughter Natalie. She does computer things. The morning after the exclusion text, I met my best friend Sophie at our usual coffee shop downtown. She took one look at my face and ordered me a double espresso without asking. They uninvited you from their own anniversary party? Sophie asked, her voice rising with indignation. That's a new low, even for them. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, letting the heat ground me. Mother said my presence would make guests uncomfortable. Like I'm some kind of social disease. Sophie had been my anchor since design school. She understood the creative soul in ways my family never could. She ran a small pottery studio 3 blocks from my apartment and barely scraped by, but she was happier than anyone I knew. You know what? Forget them, Sophie said firmly. You're talented, Nat. That anonymous client of yours keeps sending you work. Someone sees your worth. I nodded, but the rejection still stung like a fresh wound. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment to find something unexpected. A black envelope slipped under my door. My name was written across it in silver ink, the handwriting elegant and deliberate. Inside was a heavy cardstock invitation with embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to the reveal. Saturday, 8 p.m. The Ashford Estate. Attire, your finest armor. RSVP not required. Attendance is. At the bottom, in that same silver ink, was a handwritten note. It's time they see what I've always seen. Come, bring them if you dare. JR. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the invitation 3 more times. JR. The mysterious client who'd been sending me work for 6 months was inviting me to something called the reveal on the exact same night as my parents' anniversary gala. The Ashford Estate was legendary in our city, a a sprawling property on the outskirts of town that had been closed to the public for years after its reclusive owner passed away. Rumors swirled about who owned it now, but nobody seemed to know for certain. I immediately called Sophie. "This is either really exciting or really creepy," she said after I read her the invitation. "The Ashford estate? That place is massive. And what does bring them if you dare mean? Bring your parents." The thought made me laugh bitterly. They'd never come with me anywhere. They wouldn't be caught dead associating with my world. But something about that invitation felt significant, purposeful. Over the next few days, I tried to research JR with renewed urgency. I combed through every email we'd exchanged, looking for clues. The payment processor was routed through a corporate account that led nowhere. The email address was generic. But I noticed something I'd missed before, small details in the assignments they'd sent me. Every project had been somehow connected to themes of recognition, visibility, and justice. One logo for Voices Unheard Foundation. Another for Second Sight Gallery. It was like JR had been building towards something, preparing me for something bigger. Wednesday morning brought another email from JR. "Natalie, your work on the Reckoning initiative exceeded expectations. For our final project before the reveal, I need something personal. Design a piece that represents your truth, not what others expect of you, but who you actually are. No constraints. No audience in mind except yourself. Send it by Friday. This matters more than you know." I sat at my desk, staring at the blank canvas on my screen. My truth. For 6 years, I designed what clients wanted, twisted my vision to fit their needs, made myself smaller to fit into spaces that didn't want me. What was my truth? I worked through the night, fueled by coffee and something deeper, a desperate need to be seen. The design that emerged was raw and honest. It showed a figure breaking free from a gilded frame, colors exploding outward in defiant celebration. Inside the frame was gray conformity. Outside was chaotic, beautiful freedom. It was everything my parents had tried to contain and everything I'd fought to become. When I sent it Friday morning, JR's response came within minutes. "This is what I've been waiting for. You're ready. See you Saturday. Prepare yourself. Everything changes after tonight." The message should have excited me, but instead, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. What was I walking into? That evening, Veronica called me for the first time in months. "Mother told me they uninvited you from the gala," she said, her voice careful and measured. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Veronica continued, though her tone suggested obligation rather than genuine remorse. That was harsh, even for them. I sat on my apartment floor, back against the wall. Was it though? They've been pretending I don't exist for years. This is just more honest about it. There was a pause on the line. Veronica and I used to be close when we were younger, before our paths diverged so dramatically. She'd been the one who taught me to ride a bike, who'd sneak me cookies after I'd been sent to bed without dinner for some minor infraction. But somewhere along the way, she'd chosen their approval over our sisterhood. "You could still come," she said quietly. "I could talk to them. If you just apologize for what?" I cut her off, anger flaring hot in my chest. For being myself, for choosing a career I actually love instead of one that would look good on their Christmas card. That's not fair, Nat. You know how important image is to them. Father's firm, mother's charity boards, they have reputations to maintain. And I'm the stain on that reputation. The words came out flat, factual. Veronica sighed. "I didn't call to fight. I just thought you should know that Theodore Blackwell will be at the gala. He's apparently making some kind of announcement about a new art initiative. Father's been bragging about it all week." My breath caught. Theodore Blackwell was a legendary figure in the design and tech world, a billionaire entrepreneur who'd revolutionized digital media. After I hung up with Veronica, I immediately searched for information about Theodore Blackwell. The man was notoriously private despite his public success. He built an empire on design innovation, creating platforms that had changed how people experienced digital art. He was known for discovering unknown talent and launching careers overnight. But he rarely appeared in public, preferring to work behind the scenes. Why would someone like that be at my parents' anniversary party? Father's law firm handled corporate contracts, nothing in the creative industries. It didn't make sense. Unless, a wild thought struck me. Could JR be connected to Blackwell somehow? I pulled out every email from my mysterious client, searching for any hint. Then I noticed something in the signature file of one email, a tiny logo I'd glossed over before. It was the symbol for Blackwell Industries, almost invisible in the footer. My hand started shaking. Had I been working for Theodore Blackwell this entire time? But why would someone of his stature hire an unknown designer like me through anonymous channels? And what did it have to do with my parents? Saturday arrived faster than I wanted. I stood in front of my closet, staring at the limited options. The invitation had said, "Your finest armor." I had one good dress, a deep emerald green that Sophie had insisted I buy for portfolio presentations. It was simple but elegant, the kind of thing that made me feel capable rather than decorative. As I got ready, my phone buzzed with messages from my parents' gala. Veronica sent photos of the mansion decorated in white and gold, champagne fountains, and guests in designer gowns. At 7:30 p.m., I stood outside my apartment building, my hands clutching the black invitation like a lifeline. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and the driver stepped out, opening the rear door. "Miss Carson, I'm here to escort you to the Ashford estate." The car's interior was luxurious, soft leather seats and ambient lighting that cast everything in a warm glow. As we drove through the city and out toward the estate, I watched the familiar streets give way to wooded roads I'd never traveled. The driver remained silent, professional. My mind raced with possibilities and fears. What was I about to walk into? The Ashford estate appeared like something from a dream as we rounded the final curve. The mansion was lit from within, warm light spilling from tall windows. The architecture was stunning, a blend of classical elegance and modern design that made the building feel both timeless and contemporary. It was easily twice the size of my parents' house, sitting on grounds that seemed to stretch forever into the darkness. Another car was already parked in the circular drive, a Mercedes I didn't recognize. The driver opened my door and gestured toward the entrance. "Someone's waiting for you inside, Miss Carson." My heels clicked on the stone pathway as I approached the massive front doors. They opened before I could knock, revealing a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Natalie, welcome. I'm Catherine, Mr. Blackwell's assistant. He's been looking forward to meeting you." So it was true. Theodore Blackwell was Jr. Catherine led me through the entrance hall, and I couldn't help but stare. The interior of the Ashford estate was breathtaking. High ceilings with intricate molding, artwork that looked like it belonged in museums, and a grand staircase that curved upward like something from a fairy tale. But what caught my attention most were the designs on the walls. My designs. Every piece I'd created for JR over the past 6 months was displayed in elegant frames, lit like precious artwork. The logo for Voices Unheard Foundation, the branding for Second Sight Gallery, the Reckoning Initiative emblem. And there, in the center of the main hall, was my final piece, the figure breaking free from the gilded frame, blown up to 6 feet tall and displayed with museum-quality mounting. "He's been collecting your work," Catherine said softly, noticing my stunned expression. "He says you have a gift for making people see what they've been missing." She guided me through a doorway into what appeared to be a library, but it had been transformed into something between an art gallery and a presentation space. More of my designs covered the walls, but there were also photographs and documents I didn't recognize. And standing by the window, looking out at the grounds, was a man I recognized from countless magazine articles and rare interviews. Theodore Blackwell turned as I entered. He was probably in his early 50s, with gray-streaked dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple but clearly expensive suit, and when he smiled, it was warm and genuine. "Natalie Carson," Theodore said, crossing the room with an extended hand. "It's finally time we met face to face. I'm Theodore Blackwell, though you've known me as JR, my initials for Jonathan Raymond, my middle names." His handshake was firm, and up close, I noticed something in his eyes, a depth of emotion that seemed personal, almost familiar. "Why?" The question burst out of me before I could craft something more eloquent. Why the mystery? Why hire me anonymously? Why am I here? Theodore gestured to a sitting area near the fireplace. "Those are excellent questions, and you deserve complete answers. But first, I need to tell you a story. It goes back 7 years, to a moment you've probably forgotten, but that changed the entire trajectory of my life." He settled into a chair across from me, his expression growing distant with memory. I was going through the darkest period of my life. My wife had just passed away after a long illness. My company was thriving, but I felt hollow inside, like I'd lost the ability to see beauty or meaning in anything. I was in the city for a business meeting, and afterward, I found myself just walking, trying to escape the emptiness. I leaned forward, my heart beginning to race. There was something in his tone that suggested I was part of the story. I ended up in the arts district, in front of a small gallery, hosting a student exhibition from the Rhode Island School of Design. I almost walked past, but something made me go inside. Theodore's eyes met mine with an intensity that made me hold my breath. You were there, Natalie. A young design student, maybe 21 years old, volunteering at the desk because a regular person had called in sick. You probably don't remember me. I was just another tired businessman in a suit who wandered in off the street. The memory was hazy, buried under years of other moments, but as he spoke, fragments began to surface. The student exhibition. I'd volunteered last minute because Professor Chin needed help. There had been a man, older, who'd stood in front of one of my pieces for a long time. I stopped in front of your work, Theodore continued. It was a digital piece exploring the concept of invisible grief, how people carry loss in ways others can't see. It devastated me because it perfectly captured what I was feeling but couldn't express. I stood there for probably 20 minutes, and you. He paused, emotion flickering across his face. You came over and said something I'll never forget. The memory crystallized. I remembered now. The man had been crying, silently, in front of my piece. I'd approached hesitantly, unsure if I should intrude. I told you that grief meant you'd love someone enough that their absence created a void. I said softly, the words coming back to me. That the pain was proof of something beautiful that had existed. Theodore nodded, his voice thick. You said, your grief is seen, even when it feels invisible. You're not alone in it. Then you offered me a tissue and a bottle of water, and you sat with me for 15 minutes while I composed myself. You didn't try to sell me the piece or make it about you, Theodore continued. You just saw someone in pain and responded with kindness. When I finally left, I asked your name, and you wrote it down for me. Natalie Carson, RISD, class of 2020. You probably thought nothing of it, just another interaction in a long day of volunteering. Tears pricked my eyes as the memory came fully into focus. I'd been so worried about that exhibition, hoping my parents might show up even though I knew they wouldn't. That man's genuine emotional response to my work had meant more to me than any sale or award could have. That interaction gave me something I desperately needed, Theodore said. It reminded me that art and design aren't just aesthetic choices, they're acts of empathy, ways of seeing and being seen. Over the next few months, I pulled myself out of that dark place, and I thought about your words constantly. I wanted to thank you, maybe commission some work, but by the time I tried to reach out through the school, you'd graduated and disappeared into the freelance world. He stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a folder bulging with papers. So I kept track of you. Nothing invasive, just watching your career from a distance. And Natalie, what I saw infuriated me. He opened the folder, revealing newspaper clippings and printed articles. Society page photos from my parents' events, where I was cropped out or not mentioned in captions. An article about rising legal stars that featured Veronica prominently and mentioned me only as the troubled younger sister. I watched your parents systematically diminish you, Theodore said, his voice hardening with anger. Every public event, every interview, every opportunity to acknowledge your talent, they chose shame instead. 6 months ago, I decided enough was enough. You'd helped me see my grief when I desperately needed it. Now I wanted to help you be seen. He pulled out another set of papers, all the project briefs he'd sent me as JR. Every assignment I gave you was designed to draw out your authentic voice, to rebuild the confidence your family had tried to destroy. And Natalie, you exceeded every expectation. Your work isn't just technically excellent, it has soul. It has the same empathy you showed me 7 years ago. I was crying now, overwhelmed by the revelation. This powerful man had spent months orchestrating a way to help me, all because of one small kindness I'd barely remembered. But why tonight? I managed to ask. Why connect this to my parents' party? Theodore's expression shifted, becoming something fierce and determined. Because tonight, your parents are hosting Theodore Blackwell at their anniversary gala. They don't know that I've been watching. They don't know that I've seen exactly how they treat you. And they definitely don't know that the major announcement I'm making tonight at their party is directly connected to you. He checked his watch. Right about now, your father is probably giving a toast, bragging about having me as a guest. In 30 minutes, I'm supposed to arrive and announce a new initiative, a $1 million fund for emerging designers. What your parents don't know, Theodore continued, his voice carrying an edge of satisfaction, is that I've made a last-minute change to the plan. Instead of announcing the initiative at their party, I'm doing it here tonight with you. And the first recipient of the grant, the designer I'm publicly championing and bringing into partnership with Blackwell Industries, is you, Natalie Carson. The words hit me like a physical force. A $1 million fund. A partnership with Blackwell Industries. This was the kind of opportunity that launched careers, that transformed unknowns into industry leaders overnight. I can't accept this, I heard myself saying, even as every part of me wanted to reach for what he was offering. Not if it's charity, not if it's just because I was kind to you once. Theodore smiled, and it was the first time I saw real approval in his expression. That's exactly why you deserve it. Natalie, this isn't charity. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've seen thousands of portfolios, worked with hundreds of designers. Your work stands on its own merit. The kindness you showed me 7 years ago revealed your character. The designs you've created over these past 6 months proved your talent. I'm not rescuing you. I'm investing in someone who's already proven their worth. He gestured to the walls covered in my designs. Every major company I work with will see this portfolio. Every client I recommend will have your name at the top of the list. But more than that, I'm going to make sure your parents finally see what they've been too blind to recognize. How? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Theodore walked to a laptop set up on a desk in the corner. In exactly 15 minutes, I'm scheduled to video call into your parents' party to make my big announcement. Your father's probably checking his watch right now, making sure everything is perfect for when I appear on their screens. He turned the laptop so I could see. It was already connected to the party's AV system. I could see my parents' living room, decorated extravagantly, filled with guests in formal wear. My mother was laughing with a group of women near the champagne fountain. My father stood near a large screen, clearly waiting for Theodore's call. Here's what's going to happen, Theodore explained. I'm going to call in as promised. I'm going to announce the new initiative. But instead of praising your parents for hosting me, I'm going to tell everyone there about the real reason I'm making this announcement, because of a young designer who showed me kindness when I needed it most. And then I'm going to introduce you, live from the Ashford estate, as my new partner and the face of this initiative. My stomach lurched with fear and anticipation. They'll be humiliated, in front of everyone. They've spent years humiliating you, Theodore said gently. This isn't about revenge, Natalie. It's about the truth. They've told everyone you're a failure, that your work is worthless. I'm simply going to show them, and everyone they've told, that they were wrong. Devastatingly wrong. Catherine appeared in the doorway. Mr. Blackwell, it's time. The connection is ready. My heart pounded, so hard I could hear it in my ears. Theodore looked at me with understanding. You don't have to do this, Natalie. I'll support your career either way. But I think you deserve to be seen by the people who've tried so hard to make you invisible. The choice is yours. I thought about every dinner party where they'd glossed over my work. Every family gathering where they'd compared me unfavorably to Veronica. Every time they'd made me feel like my existence was something to apologize for. And I thought about that young woman in the gallery 7 years ago who'd created something honest about grief and pain, who'd reached out to a stranger in distress without thinking twice. That woman deserved to be seen. Let's do it, I said, standing up. Theodore's smile was proud. Then let's show them what they've been missing. He clicked the connection, and suddenly the laptop screen was mirrored on the large display at my parents' party. I could see heads turning, people gathering around as my father's voice boomed through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to introduce Theodore Blackwell, who's joining us this evening to make a very special announcement. Theodore appeared on their screen, professional and commanding. Leonard, Patricia, thank you for having me. Though I must confess, I'm not actually at my previous location. I'm calling from the Ashford estate. Confusion rippled through the crowd. My mother's smile looked frozen on her face. I promise to announce a major new initiative tonight, Theodore continued, his voice carrying easily across the connection. The Blackwell Foundation for Emerging Design Talent, a $1 million fund dedicated to supporting designers whose vision has been overlooked or undervalued by conventional metrics. Polite applause started, but Theodore held up a hand. Before I share details, I need to tell you why I created this fund. 7 years ago, I was in the darkest period of my life. I'd lost my wife, and I'd lost my ability to see beauty or meaning in anything. I wandered into a student gallery, and there I met a young designer whose work moved me to tears. But more than that, this person saw my pain and responded with pure, uncalculated kindness. I watched my father's expression shift from pride to confusion. Where was this going? That designer helped me remember that art and design are fundamentally acts of empathy. That conversation changed my life's trajectory. I've spent years wanting to properly acknowledge this person's talent and thank them for their compassion. Theodore paused, letting the tension build. That designer is here with me tonight at the Ashford estate. And as of this moment, they are the first recipient of the Blackwell Foundation grant and my newest partner at Blackwell Industries. He gestured off-screen toward me. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Natalie Carson. I stepped into frame beside Theodore, my heart hammering, and watched my parents' faces drain of color on the screen. The room full of their guests went absolutely silent. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats before the chaos began. I watched on the screen as my mother's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. My father's face went from pale to crimson. Veronica stood in the background, her mouth open in shock. Theodore's voice cut through the murmurs rising from the crowd. Natalie's work over the past 6 months has been nothing short of extraordinary. Her empathy, her vision, her technical skill, she represents everything this industry needs. I've seen thousands of portfolios in my career, and I can say without hesitation that she's one of the most talented designers of her generation. On the screen, I could see my mother frantically whispering to my father, both of them clearly trying to calculate how to respond. Other guests were pulling out their phones, some probably recording, others maybe searching for my name online. Some of you may know Natalie, Theodore continued, his tone pointed. She's Leonard and Patricia's daughter. Though I understand they haven't always recognized her exceptional talent. It was a surgical strike, polite enough to pass as professional commentary, but sharp enough that everyone understood the implication. My father finally found his voice. Theodore, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Natalie she's... He couldn't finish. How could he explain years of dismissal without revealing himself? No misunderstanding, Theodore said smoothly. Natalie and I will be working together to launch this initiative. In fact, the Ashford estate will serve as the foundation's headquarters. We'll be hosting showcases here for undiscovered talent. I found my voice, forcing myself to speak clearly despite my shaking hands. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. This opportunity means more than you know. Then, because I couldn't help myself, I looked directly at the camera, at my parents' faces frozen in horror on the other screen. I'm grateful to everyone who believed in my work when it would have been easier to dismiss it. The pointed comment landed exactly as intended. Some guests were now openly staring at my parents. One woman I recognized as mother's friend Catherine was whispering urgently to her husband, both of them looking between my parents and the screen in confusion. My father tried to recover. Natalie, darling, this is wonderful news. We're so proud. Are you? Theodore interrupted, his voice carrying steel beneath the politeness. Because I've watched you introduce Veronica at events with glowing praise while barely mentioning Natalie's name. I've seen articles where Natalie was described as troubled or a disappointment. Just 2 days ago, Patricia sent Natalie a message uninviting her from this very party because her presence would be uncomfortable. The gasps from the crowd were audible through the speakers. My mother looked like she might faint. This was her worst nightmare, private shame made public in front of the very society she'd worked so hard to impress. How dare you? My father started, his voice rising with indignation and panic. But Theodore wasn't finished. I dare because Natalie Carson showed me kindness when I was a stranger in pain. She saw my humanity when she had nothing to gain from it. That's who she is. Not the failure you've told people about, but someone with extraordinary gifts that you were too concerned with appearances to recognize. Theodore looked at me with warmth and respect. Natalie, would you like to say anything to your parents? The question hung in the air. This was my moment. I could say everything I'd held back for years, could unleash the hurt and anger that had built up through countless dismissals. I could match their cruelty with my own. But as I opened my mouth, I thought about the person I'd been in that gallery 7 years ago. The person who'd seen pain and responded with compassion. The person I still wanted to be, despite everything. I don't need to say anything they don't already know, I said quietly. They made their choices. I made mine. The difference is, I chose kindness and authenticity over appearances and status. I chose to build something real, rather than tear others down to feel important. I looked at the screen, at the crowd of people who'd watched my parents diminish me for years. To everyone there tonight, I hope you remember that how we treat people when they can't benefit us reveals who we really are. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell, for seeing what my parents couldn't. Theodore ended the connection, and suddenly the library was silent except for my ragged breathing. I just publicly called out my parents in front of their entire social circle. There was no going back from this. You were perfect, Theodore said gently. Honest, direct, and you took the high road without letting them off the hook. That takes real strength. Catherine appeared with a glass of water, which I accepted gratefully. My hands were still shaking, adrenaline making my whole body feel electric. What happens now? I asked, my voice small in the aftermath of what we'd just done. Theodore gestured for me to follow him. We walked through the estate toward another wing I hadn't seen yet. He opened a door to reveal a massive studio space, top-of-the-line computers, design equipment, a wall of windows overlooking the grounds, and shelf after shelf of art supplies and reference materials. This is yours, Theodore said simply. Your workspace at the Ashford estate. You'll have complete creative freedom, access to every resource you need, and a salary that will let you focus entirely on your craft without worrying about bills or freelance hustling. The space was beyond anything I'd imagined. It was the kind of studio successful designers dreamed about, and he was just giving it to me. The foundation will launch officially in 3 months, Theodore continued. You'll be the face of it, helping select other recipients, mentoring emerging designers. But more than that, you'll be creating. The world needs to see what you can do when you're not constrained by other people's limitations. I walked to the windows, looking out at the grounds bathed in moonlight. My parents will never forgive this. Veronica will probably never speak to me again. Is that a loss? Theodore asked gently. Or is it freedom? The question hit something deep. How much of my pain had come from trying to earn love from people who decided I wasn't worth it? What would it feel like to stop reaching for their approval and build something entirely my own? My phone started buzzing in my purse, texts coming in rapid succession. I pulled it out to see messages from Veronica, my mother, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Veronica's message was cold. You've embarrassed the entire family. Was it worth it? My mother's was worse. You've always been selfish, but this is unforgivable. Don't expect to be welcomed back. But there were other messages too. Sophie had sent a string of excited emojis and holy shit you're working with Theodore Blackwell. Former classmates from RISD were reaching out with congratulations. People I'd lost touch with were saying they'd always known I had talent. And then there was a message from an unknown number. This is Catherine Morrison, your mother's friend. I wanted you to know, many of us have seen how your parents treated you over the years. It was never right. Congratulations on your success. You've earned it. I showed Theodore the message, and he smiled. The truth has a way of coming out. People aren't as blind as we think. They see patterns of behavior, even if they don't always speak up. He was right. I'd assumed everyone believed my parents' narrative, but maybe some had been watching with more critical eyes than I knew. There's one more thing I need to show you, Theodore said, leading me back to the library. He pulled out a photograph from his wallet, old and creased from being carried for years. It showed him and a woman, both younger, laughing at some private joke. This is Catherine, my wife, Theodore said softly, looking at the photo with love and lingering grief. She was an artist, a painter who created the most incredible landscapes. But she came from a family that saw art as a hobby, not a legitimate career. They pushed her toward business school, practical choices, stable paths. He tucked the photo back in his wallet carefully. She spent the first 15 years of our marriage working jobs she hated, painting only on weekends. By the time I'd made enough money that she could quit and paint full-time, she'd lost some of that spark. The joy had been dimmed by years of having her passion treated as worthless. His eyes met mine with fierce intensity. When she got sick, one of her biggest regrets was that she'd wasted so many years trying to please people who never valued what mattered most to her. She made me promise that if I ever had the chance to help someone pursue their art without compromise, I would. The pieces clicked into place. This isn't just about me, I said quietly. It's about her too. This is about everyone who's been told their gifts don't matter, Theodore corrected. Catherine, you, the designers will help through this foundation. It's about changing the narrative that says practical and profitable are the only measures of worth. He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a portfolio, handing it to me. Inside were designs, logos, and branding materials I'd never seen before. These are Catherine's paintings, digitized and ready to be incorporated into the foundation's visual identity. I want her art and your design to work together, showing what's possible when creativity is honored rather than diminished. Tears streamed down my face as I looked through Catherine's work. Her landscapes were stunning, full of light and emotion, each brushstroke carrying intention and feeling. To incorporate her art into the foundation felt sacred, like we were building something that honored both her memory and the future of designers like me. I don't know what to say. I managed through my tears. You've given me everything I needed when I didn't even know how to ask for it. Theodore shook his head gently. You gave me something first. You saw someone in pain and offered compassion without expecting anything in return. That's rare, Natalie. That's worth building an empire around. Catherine returned, this time with champagne and a gentle smile. I thought we might toast to new beginnings, she said, pouring 3 glasses. We raised our glasses, and Theodore's voice was warm. To Natalie Carson, may your light never be dimmed again. To Catherine, may her legacy live on in every artist we help. And to the truth, may it always find its way into the light. We drank, and I felt something shift fundamentally inside me. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't the disappointment, the embarrassment, the daughter they wished was different. I was a designer with a future, a partner in something meaningful, someone whose gifts were recognized and valued. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Theodore Blackwell has no right to interfere in our family. I showed Theodore and he laughed. They still don't get it. This isn't interference. This is consequence. 3 months later, I stood in the Ashford Estate's main hall, transformed into a gallery for the foundation's official launch. My designs cover the walls alongside Catherine's paintings, creating a visual story of resilience and recognition. The space was filled with journalists, industry leaders, and young designers who'd submitted portfolios for consideration. Sophie stood beside me, squeezing my hand in excitement. Theodore was giving the opening remarks, explaining the foundation's mission to a crowd that hung on his every word. My parents had been invited, professionally and publicly, by Theodore himself. They'd had no choice but to attend. Declining would have been social suicide after the truth about how they treated me became public knowledge. They stood near the back, uncomfortable and out of place in a room celebrating everything they dismissed. Veronica hadn't come. She'd sent a brief email saying she needed time to process everything. I'd written back that I understood, that I'd be here when she was ready. Some bridges took longer to rebuild than others. As Theodore finished his speech, he called me to the front. Natalie, would you like to introduce our first group of foundation recipients? I walked to the microphone, looking out at the crowd. At the back, my father's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something other than disappointment, maybe regret, maybe recognition. It didn't change the past, but it was something. When I was 21, I created a piece about invisible grief. I began. About how we carry pain in ways others can't see. I've learned that the same is true for gifts and talents. Sometimes the people closest to us can't see what we have to offer. Sometimes we have to find people who can truly see us. I gestured to the young designers, waiting nervously on the side. These 5 recipients represent different disciplines, different backgrounds, and different visions. What they share is exceptional talent that deserves to be nurtured, not diminished. The Blackwell Foundation exists to make sure no one's gifts remain invisible simply because they don't fit someone else's definition of success. The room erupted in applause. As I announced each recipient and watched their faces transform with joy and relief and validation, I thought about that girl in the gallery 7 years ago. She'd been kind because it was who she was, not because she expected anything in return. And somehow, impossibly, that kindness had circled back, transformed and amplified, creating ripples that would touch hundreds of lives. After the ceremony, my mother approached hesitantly. "Natalie, your father and I would like to speak with you if you're willing." I looked at her, this woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me table manners and piano scales, who'd also made me feel worthless for 6 years. "I'm willing to listen," I said carefully. "But I won't pretend the past didn't happen. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with acknowledging the truth." My mother's eyes filled with tears. We were wrong. We were so concerned with appearances that we couldn't see what was right in front of us. "You've always been remarkable, and we punished you for it because it scared us. I don't know if you can forgive that." I didn't answer immediately. Forgiveness wasn't something I could manufacture on command. But standing there in my studio space, surrounded by work that mattered, with Theodore and Catherine and Sophie supporting me, I realized something important. I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I had built something real without it. And maybe that freedom meant I could eventually choose to forgive them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. "We'll see," I said finally. "Let's start with honesty and go from there." As the evening continued, I found Theodore standing by the window, looking out at the grounds where fairy lights had been strung through the trees. "Thank you," I said simply, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." He turned with that warm smile I'd come to treasure. "Thank you for reminding me that kindness, true kindness, is never wasted. You changed my life 7 years ago, Natalie. I just gave you the platform you always deserved." As I looked around the gallery, at the designers whose careers were launching, at the fusion of my work with Catherine's art, at the future we were building together, I understood the real lesson. We measure our worth by the wrong metrics, by status and wealth and approval from people who don't understand us. But true success is simpler and more profound. It's being seen for who we really are. It's using our gifts to help others be seen. It's remembering that a single act of compassion can change everything, creating ripples that touch lives we'll never know about. My parents had told everyone I was a disgrace. And then I walked in with Theodore Blackwell, not because he saved me, but because years ago I'd saved him. And in doing so, we'd saved each other. That's what kindness does. It circles back, transformed and multiplied, until the whole world shifts. This is the end of my story.